I'll make this one quick and concise. Raw truth on the pros and cons of counting some macros. We're gonna go over pros, cons, and then the tips and tricks, all right, for those who are struggling, all right? Let's start from the top. The pros of counting macros, all right? The pros are clarity. Like 100%, there's clarity. Like by the end of the week, you're not like, oh, why did I gain weight? Why did I lose weight? The numbers are there. You can see everything. You know, you're like, okay, I gained weight because I didn't track anything Saturday and Sunday and I completely fucked up. And yeah, that's why I gained weight. Or I lost weight because every single day of the week, I was in a deficit and I know that for a fact, and even on Saturday and Sunday, and I know what my calories are, and like I 100% know. Like, so like if you are gaining weight and you're just like, what the heck, why did I gain weight? You know, it's usually because we're not tracking accurately or not tracking consistently, and like just being able to like know that helps. Like it's that awareness that makes a huge difference. And if you're really serious about it, it's the awareness that makes a huge difference. So that's like a huge pro of counting macros, is that clarity. The second pro of counting macros is results. Like you get straight up freaking results doing this stuff, you guys. If you dial it in and you got it down to the fact, you know for a fact that you have, 50 grams of fats, and you had 200 grams of carbs, and you had 180 grams of protein, and you know that for scientific truth because you weighed it all out and you made sure and you measured everything, you tracked and recorded, you're gonna see results guaranteed. That's how like coaches are able to like bring people into a program and churn them out, and like all of a sudden they're like new people and they have like all ripped and stuff. That's how, because like people just learn how to like track their caloric intake, track their macros. So you get results, like straight up, you get really freaking results because you understand where your calories need to be. You know you need to be in a deficit. You know if you're in a surplus. You just know how the game works, right? And then the last pro is the flexibility. So it's like sometimes, when we start in our health and fitness journey in the nutrition end of things, and we'll start in the kitchen with a meal plan, right? And meal plans are great. I give my clients meal plans to start out. And meal plans are awesome because like all of the thinking and I know what I'm going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all of that's done for you already. But like, I don't like being stuck to a meal plan, like that I have to eat this thing no matter what. Like, don't get me wrong. I love, it's cool too. Like, I like that as well. Like, I can totally eat like a dog, chicken, broccoli, rice, and like basic stuff all the time. But I love the flexibility that is offered from counting macros. Like in a weird way, like if I don't want to have, this is gonna sound a little naughty, but like if I don't want to have rice for lunch and I want to have 2 Pop-Tarts instead, like I am allowed to. I am like scientifically, by the laws of thermodynamics, 400 calories of rice or 400 calories of Pop-Tarts, it's still 400 calories, right? So I can still eat the Pop-Tarts and I can make that audible call, and that's awesome. I love being able to have that control. But I have to have the understanding that the rice is gonna fill me up and give me energy like for a really long time. And it's not gonna spike my blood sugar, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be good. I'm not gonna be hungry, I'm gonna be satisfied. I know that. But the rice, on a flavor out of 1 out of 10 is like a 5 out of 10. It can't go wrong, completely average. A Pop-Tart is like a 9 out of 10 of flavor. It's awesome. I love Pop-Tarts, right? It's like one of my favorites. But I know that like if I do eat the Pop-Tart and the calories are the same, it's gonna be great. It's all good. I can still do that. But I know that the calorie is gonna kind of like the Pop-Tart is gonna kind of like make me a little bit hungrier yet. I'm not gonna be as satisfied. I might like have another craving for more after eating it. And I might like, my blood sugar is gonna be it's gonna spike up real quick, and then that's what causes the craving again. But like, if I can have the discipline to be like, all right, well, I don't care if I'm gonna have more cravings or not. I'm just gonna eat my Pop-Tarts now and deal with the cravings later and just like drink more water. You can do that. I did that for a long time. But if you're just like, if you know that like Pop-Tarts are like a trigger food for you, right? And like all of a sudden you're eating 1 package of Pop-Tarts and then 2 and then the box and then you're eating more, then you have to reevaluate and think, okay, maybe I won't eat these Pop-Tarts, because if I eat one Pop-Tart, then everything just goes in a domino effect and it falls off the hill. I'm gonna stick to the rice now because I know that it's not gonna give me a domino effect. I know that already, right? And I can make that call, and I'm gonna stick to my rice. And I'll find some other kind of like sweet tooth destroyer, right? So I can get rid of my sweet tooth. I don't need the Pop-Tart, and I'll find another option for that, right? So those are the like 3 pros real quick of like counting your macros: clarity, results, and flexibility. All right, when you count your macros, you know what's going into your body, period. When you count your macros, you're going to be able to adjust over time and make adjustments. If you're consistent, you're going to see results, guaranteed, period. And then counting macros, it's flexible. You can like choose to have rice, or you can choose to have Pop-Tarts. You can make different calls, but you just have to know the upsides and the downsides of what's in your food to be able to make those calls a little bit better, right? So those are the 3 pros. Let's go into the cons, all right? There are cons to anything in life, pretty much. Everything has its set of pros and cons, and I think we should be able to kind of understand the positives and the negative side of things so we can really get a good understanding of how to use them. So the cons of counting your macros, right? A huge con. So when I first started my weight loss journey, and I was about like, 50, I was about halfway through, right? I was probably about 50 pounds down, had 50 more pounds to go. At that point, I was obsessed. I was so obsessed because, like, when you want something so bad, that's what happens in most of us human beings. We get obsessed. We'll do anything in our power to actually get there. So I was super obsessed with just like making it to 100 pounds down, and I wanted to keep going. I didn't want anything to stand in my way. So like I would not eat food. I wouldn't let it enter my body unless I counted it already. Unless unless I tracked it, I was not going to eat. It was seriously like that was like an eating disorder. Straight up, I'm gonna be straight honest. That is pretty much like an eating disorder in itself. Like I know the difference between being disciplined and like being so obsessed that you're just like you're not acting pretty like normal. That's a little obsessive. But like, hey, it depends on who you ask is obsessive. If I talk to Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, and if I asked him a question about obsession, he'd be like, no, that's dedication to your craft, dedication to what you're trying to do, right? And all respect in the world to that, right? But someone you might ask, and they'll be like, geez, that was a little obsessive. You wouldn't eat anything unless you tracked it, or you wouldn't, you were so caught up on that. Which leads me into like the second con of counting your macros. Because I was so obsessed and like I just had to make sure everything was counted before I ate, I would really I would cancel certain events. So for instance, like if my family was having like a cookout or a grill out, or if there was like a birthday party out there, or if people invited me out to the bars, I guess, or like just like certain functions, I wouldn't go just because I knew that there was unhealthy food there. Looking back, it's almost crazy, but I just like straight up, I would not go there because I felt like I didn't have the willpower to say no to the good foods that they were having. And I was like just so like dedicated, so obsessed with wanting to lose this weight. I would tell them I would just not go to these events because I didn't want to eat the food there. And like that is like, that's a fine line you got to walk as well, because looking at it now, like I don't think you should like miss out on family events like that for your diet. I feel like you should just be able to make flexible, smart choices when you get there. Not really have to give in to all the junk food, but like actually just like find the best options that are there available to you. Maybe even bring something there with you, or fill up, be full before you even go, so you're not hungry when you get there. But back then I didn't know that, and back then I would just like I would be so obsessed on counting my macros, I wouldn't even go out to like family or friend social events, just for the fact that so I wouldn't consume the calories that were there. So that's like con number 2, right? The first con is you can be obsessive over counting your macros. The second one would be like maybe you're no longer like going to certain events because you don't want to screw up hitting your macros. And then the third con is probably one of the biggest ones that most people find the biggest friction biggest barrier to entry on counting your macros is that it feels tedious, right? Let's be honest. Like, it feels tedious because you have to have a digital, or like a weight scale, a food kitchen scale, in your kitchen, right? To weigh out all your foods, everything. You got to weigh everything down to the gram. Every little granule of rice needs to be weighed out. Every little, every time you put on a condiment, you weigh it out. Every time you have a protein, you weigh it out. So that's like super tedious, right? It doesn't take, it really doesn't even take more than 5 minutes per whatever you're trying to measure here. But it feels tedious. Feels like, geez, I got to do this extra step on top of just throwing everything together and cooking it. So that can be like a huge thing that makes people not want to like count macros because it's so freaking tedious, right? It can be super tedious. But there's like certain hacks that we can get into, and we're about to get into the tips and tricks to make it a little less tedious. So let's review all the pros and cons of counting macros real quick, and then we'll dive into the tips and tricks, all right? I know it's a long one today, but I like bringing this training out. I hope it's value. If you guys are getting any value from this, drop some fire in the comments. Let me know, all right? But let's go over the pros and cons, and then we'll go into the tips and tricks. The pros of counting your macros: you get clarity, you get results, and you get flexibility. The cons is it can be so good you become obsessive. You deny yourself going to special events, family, social events. And then 3, it can be tedious. It feels tedious trying to weigh everything out and have everything in preparation, right? So now, finally, we'll go into the tips and tricks. And if you guys are still here fucking with me, I really fuck with you. So here we go. Here are the tips and tricks that might make it a little bit easier for you guys to count your macros, all right? These are some tips and tricks that I learned over the range of my career that make it just like a little bit easier to hit those target numbers that you're trying to hit, all right? So one big thing that you can do that like makes it a little bit less tedious, it makes it less tedious to count your macros is if, so first off, you can utilize apps, right? There's apps for this stuff now, right? So MyFitnessPal is like almost the industry standard. It was my go-to throughout the whole entire freaking career of my weight loss. I use MyFitnessPal to track everything. That's what I still use, like 10 years down the road. So it's tried and true. And what I would do with MyFitnessPal is like the night before I would track the next day's food. I would do the whole day of eating, like already weighed out in MyFitnessPal and like tracked in the app, and then I would just actually fit those measurements as I went about my day. So I wouldn't eat stuff and then track it. It was already tracked, and then I would eat it, so I would kind of like flip the script a little bit, and it made tracking macros a little bit less tedious. So the night before, track everything from breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything down to your late night snack, and then track everything the night before. It'll make it so much easier going throughout your day, so you don't feel like you're like catching up with tracking your macros, all right? And then another big thing that like kind of made tracking macros a little bit easier for me was in the beginning, not so much worrying about every macro. I used to, I've dialed in on every macro right away, but something that can make it really easy and a little bit less overwhelming at first is just count your calories and your protein. Carbs and fats are plentiful. It's protein, which is hard for most people to get in enough protein per day to build their muscle, tone their muscle, hold on to their muscle. It's like protein is probably the most beneficial macronutrient for your body in regards to all those things. So what you can do to make it a little less overwhelming in the beginning is like, don't worry about so much counting your carbs or counting your fats. Just count your calories, hit the calorie goal that you got to hit, and then worry about hitting the adequate amount of protein, the adequate amount of like grams of protein that you got to hit per day. All right. Another tip, I'm just going to keep rifling off tips here, and you guys can jot them down later, but sometimes if the apps are like too, maybe too fancy, go old school, go pen and paper, just go pencil and paper, and just like keep a notebook in your kitchen, and you can write everything down, like that. Sometimes that is actually, a little bit easier for people to remember. So you go pen and paper, and then I think actually we'll wrap it up. Oh no, we won't wrap it up. We got a couple more tips. So a couple more tips and tricks on counting your macros is when you weigh out your protein or your protein, like chicken, beef, all that stuff, you can weigh it out either cooked or either raw, but you have to just pick one exclusively. So don't try to weigh out and measure everything raw on Monday, and then everything on Tuesday you start measuring everything cooked, because the moisture inside of the meat, the water that's in there, it actually like it changes how much the entire food weighs after you cook it. So sometimes, you know, it can throw off your macros by a little bit, I guess. It gives a little bit of inaccuracy. So the best way to prevent that is either measure everything raw or measure everything cooked. Simple, right? So I measure everything cooked. I measure it after I cook it. That's just how I do it. Some people like to swear by going only raw. I'll do it cooked. Another tip. Let me see. I got a couple other tips here. Oh yeah, another good tip. 2 tips. All right, final 2 tips. They might be really basic, really straightforward, but the last 2 tips are: there's usually 2 ways that people will go about weighing out their foods. You can either put your plate right on the food scale and like measure, you know, as you're adding everything on your plate, you measure your rice and then you zero it out, and then you put on your chicken and you weigh that out, you zero it out, you know, add everything like that. You can weigh it out that way. Another great way, obviously, is meal prepping, right? You just get your Tupperware, get your army of Tupperware out. You weigh everything out, you know, every time you put it in the piece of Tupperware, and you have it ready to go for the next day. Meal prep is by far the biggest time saver, but it's also a little bit of like the biggest habit to like pull yourself in to start doing, right? But it's also the biggest time saver. So meal prep for sure. Oh, and then I got a couple more bonus tips for you guys. I just got all kinds of good value for you guys. When you guys count your macros, I never counted my veggies. I just never counted them. I counted every vegetable that I ever ate, and still pretty much do. I didn't worry about weighing it out. Never worried about weighing out broccoli or peppers or onions or tomato. No vegetable. Like vegetables, I'm sure most people do not eat enough of anyway. So like, I'm not gonna tell people. I mean, I'm not gonna like. Yeah, I'm just gonna not gonna tell myself to stop eating vegetables because they have calories, because usually the reality is just like no one's eating enough vegetables. So I never weighed out my vegetables and like counted calories. I'm sure if you're going to like be bodybuilding stage lean, sub 5%, yeah, you'll do that. But otherwise, don't count your veggies. The more, the freaking merrier, guys. And then sometimes you gotta be like a little bit cautious with this rule, this final rule. Condiments. You got to be careful with condiments. I fill my house with like sugar-free, low freaking calorie, super macro friendly condiments, to the point where they're so light on macros and so light, you know, they're so calorically small, I don't need to count them, you know, so I can just like have as much barbecue sauce as I want, because it's only 15 calories per like 30 grams, which is nothing. But sometimes, you know, like we'll make food, and like the ranch that we use will have a ton of fat, and then the calories will just be like crazy, and you just pretty much ate like 2 cheeseburgers worth of calories on this salad, right? So be careful with your condiments. I really like to focus on just having healthy freaking condiments, so I can just like pretty much eat them without tracking too much. But if you like, you know, high calorie, I have Chick-fil-A sauce here, for example. That's a higher calorie condiment, and I will use my scale to measure that out. But if you're doing condiments, you got to be careful, right? That's like a silent killer that a lot of people will have, right? I think we've all heard of the example of like someone having a salad and then like the ranch just kind of completely throws everything off. That's still the case today. But yeah, guys, those are the pros and cons, tips and tricks of counting macros. The pros are the clarity, the results, the flexibility. The cons, you know, you can be a little obsessive once you start getting those results. You might start saying no to like some social events because you don't want to eat the foods. At least that was how I was. And then finally it can feel a little tedious at times, but the results are there, you guys. And just follow the 80-20 rule for the most part. Like, you know, 80% of the time you're eating healthy, 20% of the time you're eating whatever soothes your soul. Those are pretty much like always good rules of thumb. And the thing is, you don't have to count macros for the rest of your life. It just teaches you, like it teaches you what your body responds well to. Like, I know so much after like 2 years straight of counting macros. Like, I can just like really eyeball foods and know that my body, at a certain amount of carbs, I feel great. If I start having too many carbs, I start feeling bloated and sluggish. Or if I have really high protein, I know my muscles and my weight loss is going to be all green and looking good. So it's like the journey of counting your macros and understanding weighing your foods out and things like that, the entire time you're just building your relationship that you have with food. A lot of us end up in kind of like undesirable health and fitness positions is because our relationship food isn't where it needs to be yet. I think we all have a healthy relationship with food somewhere out there, and we just gotta figure out what it is. You know, someone's healthy relationship of food might look like an entire day of eating clean, and then they have a nice little small tub of ice cream at the night because it still fits in their macros and they're still able to keep a healthy weight and stuff like that. You know, like, or maybe someone's, you know, a healthy relationship with food looks like every day at lunch they have Pop-Tarts instead of rice because it keeps them motivated to want to eat healthy long term. So what counting macros does, it helps you uncover that fitness journey, that relationship with food that you have. So once you start counting your macros, it's just like you kind of treat your body as a science experiment, and you start seeing like, ooh, I feel really good if I start having low carb. Or maybe some people are like, ooh, if I have really high carbs, I feel really good. And you only know that until you're consistent with it and you kind of play around and feel where you're at and see what works. Or maybe you see like, okay, every Friday night I stop counting my macros. What am I doing Saturday that keeps throwing me off, that makes me want to not count? Or what's on Sunday, you know, that I keep being in this huge surplus for? Why is that? Is it an emotional reason? Is it an environmental reason? So counting macros is just like, you know, it's more data for you to understand how you can relate to your food and what your food is doing, you know, in regards to your health and fitness. The biggest thing is, you guys, you can never outwork a bad diet. I wish you could. I wish you could outwork a bad diet. But if you guys want to start seeing some results before summertime, just getting that food scale in the kitchen, and maybe you don't start with measuring out every meal of the day, but maybe you just measure out breakfast, or maybe you just measure out lunch, or just take it one step at a time, right? And just start understanding like this relationship that you have with food a little bit better, and you'll start seeing results. All right, so I've been freaking going on a jam. This is a real fun topic. I'm gonna come out with some more macro stuff down the road, but I seriously appreciate all you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to my spiel on counting macros. I hope you guys, are just, dipping your toes into it, feeling it out, understanding the process, and then just realize it's a good tool that will be your ally as well. And you don't, just like a meal plan, just like counting macros, like, you don't have to stick to it for the rest of your life. You can go to Christmas and just like not count everything and just eat and live a little bit, and then come back to counting when you want to get dialed in. All right, so it's not like live by it, die by it, but it's a tool that we can utilize when we're really trying to get sharp and really trying to get focused. This was a good one. I'm gonna try to come up with some more good stuff coming out. And you guys, if there's any questions on anything, anytime, reach out to me. It gives me more ideas on stuff to talk about and what I can always help out with. So I'm gonna head out, get some breakfast down the hatch, you guys. I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Get your water in, get your exercise in, all that good stuff. All right, make sure you keep a positive attitude. That's probably the biggest thing I could give you guys for advice. All right, I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace, love, and protein. I'm out.